Welcome to Powering Through Life on the Deepest That Care Network. I'm your host, Teresa Sims, and I'm a transformational life coach, an award-winning author, and a multiple #1 best-selling co-author. Each week on Powering Through Life, my guests and I will discuss a special topic that is close to their heart. Together we will explore the challenges they have faced in life and learn what strategies and tools they have used to power through their lives. So welcome to Powering Through Life.
Hello and welcome to Powering Through Life. I'm your host, Teresa Sims, and today I have a really inspiring guest for you, and her name is Luna Sparrow. Luna has been battling low self-esteem the majority of her life, and Full Moon Rising reflects on how Luna's relationship with God guided her out from the abuse of others and herself. Through prayer and nutrition, she shares her stories and recipes that brought her into full emotional and physical health, and I think we could all use a lot more of that. So, Luna, welcome to Powering Through Life.
Well, thank you, Teresa. It's an honor to be with you today.
I'm so glad we can do this. And the full title of your book is called Full Moon Rising, My Spiritual Journey to Emotional Freedom and Physical Health. I love that title. Would you like to describe that and explain it for us, please?
Sure. Moon, of course, is Luna. Luna is moon. And so anytime I meet someone and I tell them my name, they go, oh, like the moon. And I said, yes. So that's how they remember me. Since I've had years of low self-esteem and emotional abuse, and I broke free from that, I feel like I am just now rising out of the depths of all of that. So that was where the moon rising comes from. The fullness comes from, I want to have the full benefits of being healthy and the fullness of God with life abundant and with just fullness of joy and fullness of life without being held back by old programs that are running in my head that were put there from other people.
Right, exactly. So, Luna, what was the cause of your low self-esteem as a child? Can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure we can. My parents were very abused as children, and they had no emotionally healthy examples put in front of them. So they did not know how to teach us how to be emotionally healthy. Mm-hmm. We were raised so much better than they were, but still we were controlled by guilt and shame and name-calling and just the emotional verbiage that people put on us when they want to control you and manipulate you. I don't want to make it sound like my parents were horrible. They were very overworked, and my mother had a lot of fears from her childhood. So she wanted to make sure that we obeyed instantly and we didn't question what she told us to do. We were out in the country and she didn't drive, so if we got hurt, no telling when an ambulance could have gotten there if there was an ambulance at the time. Mm-hmm. So she just manipulated us and controlled us with verbal abuse. And then occasionally, if you didn't do what she wanted you to do, there was that cold silence of withholding the love for you.
Oh, yeah.
So that just taught me that something was wrong with me. I was different than her first child. My sister was beautiful and I want to say chubby, but she was really healthy. When you look back at pictures, she wasn't chubby. And I was a tall, lanky, skinny kid that was hard to find anything she liked to eat. And I loved animals. I dove into animals. It's how I coped with all this emotional abuse. Mm-hmm. By the time I was 3, I still hadn't talked. So Mom thought something was wrong with me. So she took me to the doctor, and he said she'll talk when she wants to, but they didn't know I was talking. I was just talking to animals because animals listen to you.
Right.
And I didn't feel I got that from my parents. So that's how it started, that I started feeling something was wrong with me.
Right.
My sister wanted to play house and be the mommy. She wanted me to be the baby, but I wanted to be the dog. So I went around on my knees barking and doing things dogs do, and my sister would tell me how silly that was. And so Mom was really, really out of, she just didn't know what to do, because here she had this strange child that wasn't acting like a little girl.
Right.
So again, she, since I didn't match up to what my sister did, then I always felt that something was wrong with me and that I was not loved.
Right. And that's just, it's not a fault of either one, really. I mean, when you think back of it now, do you think that in some ways your parents did the best they could with the information and the tools that they had?
Absolutely. They didn't teach me Spanish either, because they didn't know it. So you
Right.
can't teach what you don't know.
Exactly.
And,
exactly. And then the fact that you did get better than what they had. I mean, my situation is very similar to yours. And I got better than what my parents had. However, it still wasn't good. But we take on that persona that it's our fault, everything is our fault because we're being treated differently, when it's really nothing to do with us.
Right. And then, as children, everything is magnified. We only had we had a small farm. It was only an acre, but to me it was as big as Montana.
Mm-hmm.
So these little indiscretions and these little words that my mother would say to me, although they were minute at the time, they intensified and they felt like a boulder on top of me, because I was small and everything's magnified when you're a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And so you related better to the animals. So those are the ones that you had a bond with, that you trust with, and you probably found unconditional love with. And that's probably why you chose to be that way, chose to act like one of them, because that's what you understood.
Right. And people-pleasing children usually do want to be a dog or something like that, because it's a kind of a submissive position.
Mm-hmm.
While being loved, you see love doted onto those. But yeah, I've always had a love for animals, and my daddy did too. So I got a lot of that from him, because he was my hero. I went everywhere with him and did everything with him until my brother was born, and then I was supposed to be the little girl that I didn't know how to be. But
right.
Because of focusing on the animals, though, I loved my childhood. I didn't realize that I was having any type of abuse or that we were dysfunctional, because most of the children in my neighborhood were treated the same way, if not worse.
Right, right. And there's a lot of that. And I mean, with the older generations, no offense meant, but there was a lot of that, because the parents worked so hard and they were so exhausted, and yet they didn't have the skills, they didn't have the time to even show love half the time, and not all people are like that or were like that, but I know, for myself, I know a lot of people like that as well, that it was what it was, and under no fault of our own. We were just there. And we
right, and that's yes, that was my parents too. They were both very overworked and underrested. My dad worked 12 to 16-hour days, 7 days a week, trying to save money to build a house on that little acre there we had, and we lived in a little camping trailer that he had built 2 rooms on, mm-hmm. but it had no running water and no indoor bathroom, so packing the water and boiling the water and all that ended up onto my mother.
Yeah.
And plus she had 3 children she had to try to watch. So, I understand why she had to have such control over us, because she had chores and responsibilities she had to do, and she couldn't have an unruly child that might go out and crawl in the neighbor's fence with the black Angus cattle because they like them.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, I didn't understand that at the time, but as I got older, I did understand that.
Mm-hmm. So how did that, all that grow, those infinite years there of growing up in that system and that way, wrong choice of words, in that environment, how did that affect your adult life?
Well, again, Mom still had control of me, not so much my sister, but she had control of me because I wanted to please. and I saw what she did to my sister, or my sister was rebellious, so I definitely didn't want to be rebellious. And Mom chose everything for me, even as a teenager, what I wore, where I went, classes I took, and I wanted a career. I wanted to be a veterinarian. Well, she didn't want me to be that. I wanted to be a photojournalist and travel the country with my dog in a camper. She didn't want that. And she decided I should be a secretary, and then right out of high school, she wanted me to have a boyfriend. I didn't want a boyfriend. I wanted a horse. But she didn't want us to have a horse because she thought it'd be more responsibility for her. So therefore, she wanted me to get married and be a wife, because I had been raised to be a farm wife, knowing how to cook and can and all that, all the chores, quilt.
Right.
And so I married and eat. So I married the first man that asked me, the first boy that asked me to marry him, thinking that I could finally be free and have a career, but he was worse than my mom. So since my animals were at that point limited, and he was a city boy, and he was used to all the Twinkies and the donuts and stuff that we didn't get, I stayed home and I ate. And so I ate my fillings. So I wasn't allowed, again with him, I wasn't allowed to have an opinion. I wasn't allowed to have a choice. I couldn't state anything different. My opinion couldn't be different than his, or he felt he was wrong. He was very controlling, moved me away from my family, and took the car so I would have to stay home while he was at work. So I ate, and then I started dieting anything I could find, because I just, I felt that was what I was supposed to do. And so I had years of yo-yo dieting. I'd lose weight, and then he'd become incredibly jealous and bring in the cakes and cookies, and I would eat it. And then when I gained weight again, he was okay. And so this was just a vicious cycle. And I withheld and suppressed all that anger and emotions, and that was worse than the eating. Not that the eating was good, but then I compounded this situation by suppressing all those emotions and continue eating instead of feeling. And that's when I ended up, when I was 36, I ended up with thyroid cancer. First one in my family that ever had cancer. And, of course, right after thyroid cancer, I didn't know this, but removal of the part of the thyroid throws you into high blood pressure. Oh. So I was battling high blood pressure. And that continued getting out of control. And finally, God sent me, this is where he puts wonderful people in your life. He sent me a pastor that he had a degree in helping emotionally damaged people. And he asked me if I would read a book and then come in and talk to him about it. And that set me on the road to breaking free from the overeating. But it still didn't stick. I still fell back in those old patterns. So then the health issues continued. And I came up with the high blood pressure was so out of control. And I thought it was just stress. So after I went through several years of counseling, I finally changed my emotions, and I no longer let people control me.
Interesting.
I didn't change a lot. Okay? First I had to learn who I was, because I had no identity. I was what my mother wanted me to be. I was what you wanted me to be. I didn't have a favorite color.
Right.
I didn't have a favorite author, a favorite singer. I didn't know how to match my clothing. I didn't have any of those skills. So I changed two things. I quit allowing myself to feel guilty when I hadn't done anything wrong. And I stopped asking my husband and my family and friends for permission to live my life. Oh. And I didn't go out and party or anything like that. But the things I needed friends. I was never allowed to have friends unless my mother was along. And so I didn't know how to have a personality. So I thought about it, and so I started trying on other people's personalities.
Right.
If I watched you and you were bubbly and happy, I would try that on for a week. I'd be bubbly and happy for a week. And I would keep those parts that I felt comfortable with and felt like me. And then the next week I'd find another personality and try that on. If they were rowdy and a little raunchy, then I would try that. And that didn't appeal to me, so I dumped most of that. And I kept doing this until I discovered who I was. And
it's a very interesting way to go about it. I like that. That's very interesting.
I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And the other thing I learned during my counseling is the difference between being responsible to and being responsible for someone.
Mm-hmm.
When you're responsible to someone, you honor your word, like with my husband. If I told him I was going to be home at 10:30, then I was there at 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
However, I wasn't responsible for him. If he wasn't happy, and he wasn't happy a lot, that was not my fault. I didn't let that become my burden, because we're all responsible for our own happiness. And as a codependent or a person like I was, where I wanted to please everybody, I thought I had to fix him, and I thought everything wrong with him had to be my fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I was a better wife, he wouldn't be depressed. If I was a better wife, he wouldn't treat me this way. If I was a better wife, I could walk by that cake and not eat it.
Right.
So anyway, I had to learn that all of that was wrong. So, and I couldn't do confrontation with people. So what I had to learn is when someone accused me of something, my husband especially, because most of this was coming from him at the time, I would detach, go to the other room and go, okay, why is he saying this to me? You know, the real reason for why he's saying this to me, and how can I respond to him, not react. Reacting is just doing the first thing you think of. Responding is thinking about how to deal with it in a healthy way.
Right.
And I would think about that, and then I would go back in and calmly give him my answer. So anyway, the weight came off. I still had the blood pressure, and my husband left me because he can no longer control me.
Right. That says a lot, doesn't it, right there?
Yes. Yeah, and then the other thing I had to do, and I had to repeat this over and over to myself, because, you know, we have these tapes running in our head that our mother told us and that our husband told us and society has told us. So whenever I would run a tape like that, I would tell people, you know, it doesn't hurt my feelings if you don't agree with me. It doesn't hurt my feelings if you don't like what I do or what I say. I'm not here to please you. You know, I can't please God and man, and I choose to please God. Mm-hmm. And unless I'm doing something that offends God, I don't intentionally offend people, but I also don't go out of my way to fix them. I'm not a rescuer. That's God's job, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to realize not everybody has to be my friend.
That's right.
And the biggest one, it was really hard for me because I was never allowed to say this when I was growing up. I can say no. I never was allowed to say no when I was growing up. So,
you know,
that's how I got.
For a two-letter word, it is such a massive word that we almost need to have lessons in using it correctly.
We do. I mean, you know, 2-year-olds say it all the time, but I mean, when you get old enough that other people's words they penetrate you and they start bruising you and scarring you, you need to be able to know that you can say that word no.
Exactly.
And mean it and not have any repercussions for doing it.
Exactly. Because there's no law that says one person has a right to treat another person in any way, shape, or form that's unacceptable to that individual. I mean, we all should be treated equally. We all deserve love. We all deserve happiness. We all deserve joy. And it's up to us whether we accept someone else's bad behavior or not. And you know, it's a very fine line, though, sometimes when you don't know the difference and you weren't taught the difference, right?
Exactly. I didn't know what abuse was. Even after I was married, I didn't realize I was being abused until I was at a friend's house who was a registered nurse, and I was relating something to her that my husband had said, and she stopped what she was doing and she looked at me and she said, "You do know that's abuse, don't you?" And I said, "Well, no, he didn't hit me." She said, "Luna, that's abuse. That's emotional and verbal abuse." I said, "I didn't know there was such a thing." And I was in my 30s before I ever heard this.
Right.
Because this was not taught in schools. Our parents didn't know it. We didn't have internet or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't know that.
Yeah. It's different, the different generations too. I mean, I did not grow up with, we had an AM, FM radio. We were lucky to have that and all those sorts of things, but we didn't know either what was what. And even if someone was treating you in an unfortunate manner or a hurtful manner, you didn't go around talking about it. Because I know in my case, if I talked about it, then if my parents found out about it, I would have gotten it double by the time I got home.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have school friends that I've reconnected with here in my senior years, if you want to call them that. And I didn't realize the abuse that they went through as children because it was, like you said, it wasn't spoken of.
Right.
And they had it so much worse than me. I'm like, why didn't you say something? They said, well, we thought everybody did this.
Yeah, you just assume it's normal, right? It's just what you do, and it's what your home life was like, and nobody decides it should be any different. So, Luna, will you tell us how you turned your health around based on what you've gone through? And
yes, I told you I had the thyroid cancer. I've always had the yo-yo eating disorder, and I've tried just about every diet in the book, and they do work, but they don't maintain. You can't maintain that weight. You can lose it, but the diets are for quick weight loss and not for, lifetime maintenance. So not only was I overweight, I had thyroid cancer. I ended up with diabetes. I had gallstones, pancreatitis. My high blood pressure was so far out that the doctors had me on 6 different medications twice a day and still could not get it down past 180 over 60. 180 over 90, I'm sorry. And I had stomach ulcers and gastritis, a hiatal hernia. And I didn't know all this was going on because, I didn't have any pain. But for my blood pressure, I met a nurse in my small group at church, and she had cured her congestive heart failure. And so she became my teacher, my mentor. And she taught me how to get my blood pressure down by controlling my diet and my salt intake.
Oh.
So I got my blood pressure down. And so then my diabetes, my A1C was 11. If you're diabetic, you understand that. That was pretty high. And they had me on 2 medications. And that was working, except I wasn't getting any better. I was maintaining. And so I prayed and I said, what should I do? Because she was wanting to put me on insulin, and I refused to go on insulin because my second husband was insulin resistant, and he just had a horrible time with his insulin because he was at the wrong doctor.
Oh.
But that's another story. But so my sister also is diabetic, and she was having trouble with her eyes. Her A1C was 13. She went on the current popular keto diet for 3 months and dropped her A1C really quick. And but she kept telling me how hungry she was all the time. She said, I'm just so hungry all the time. So I just gave up sugar. I was a sugar addict. I had to have it morning, noon, and night. And I gave up sugar thinking that would control my diabetes. And in 6 months, I lost like 9 pounds, and my A1C did not go down. It actually went up a little bit.
Oh.
So she gave me another pill, and I said, well, what's going on here? Why am And so I got to doing my own research. I bought a nutritional textbook at a used bookstore, which is surprisingly still very current. You know, the nutritional values and stuff haven't really changed that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to devise my own diet, and I started cutting out refined carbohydrates, which are your breads, you know, your desserts, anything made with flour and wheat, and just eating the complex carbohydrates, which are your potatoes, your peas, your carrots, your sweet potatoes. And I limited those. And within 6 months, my A1C dropped from, I think it was 9 at the time, and it dropped all the way down to 7.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I must be onto something here. So I began using myself as a guinea pig, and I checked my sugar levels 5 times a day so I could tell how my body reacted to the foods I ate.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to devise a list of things that I could have that did not affect my blood sugar. And by doing this for a year, of course, you got to go back to cooking by scratch. You know, fast food's out. Fast food's out. Pizzas are now. You can do it occasionally. Once you get under control, you can occasionally go out and enjoy those things. But you have to know that it's going to raise your sugar, and you have to take precautions against that. But by doing this, instead of taking two diabetic medications twice a day, I'm down to one diabetic medicine twice a day. Mm-hmm. And my A1C is down to a 6.4, which is very well controlled.
Yeah, that's more of an acceptable level, is it not?
Yes, my doctor is very pleased. Her major, like I said, in college was nutrition. I showed her what I was doing. She heartily approved of it, and I told her, I said, now my goal here is to get off as much medication as I can before I'm 65, because Medicare doesn't cover a lot of testing in full, and I said it doesn't cover a lot of prescriptions in full. And so she's worked with me. She showed me how to adjust my medications without having to come in every week, and she's very pleased. And so this has worked for me, and I've taken recipes and tweaked them so that they don't raise my blood sugar. Some of them I can have as much of them as I want with no rise in the blood sugar. I've even devised some desserts and I don't use anything expensive because I'm on a very limited income. You know, I don't do coconut oil. There's nothing wrong with this, but I just don't do it. I don't do the coconut oil, the coconut flour, the almond flour. You know, those things are expensive for my food budget.
Right.
So I use common foods in wise amounts, and it has really worked for me. I'm really happy with it. My energy has returned. I can now, and I didn't tell you about my heart disease that happened because of my diabetes.
Oh, my.
I ended up with a weakened heart, and my cardiologist said, you've had a heart episode. And I said, well, what does that feel like? Because I haven't felt bad at all. And she said, well, you could have caught a virus, and a heart is supposed to put out 75% of the blood each time it pumps, and yours is only doing 30.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that was why I was so tired. Mm-hmm. And so now that I've adjusted my diet, and I got the okay from my cardiologist, and I've started pushing my exercise, I can now hand wash and wax my car in the same hour on a nice warm day in the summer. I can go out and dancing on the weekends to the local VFW or wherever, and I can dance 2 and 3 hours, and it feels great. It feels great to be healthy.
Wow. That's incredible. You've given yourself a new lease on life, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a full moon rising, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. What an incredible story, Luna. Oh, my. You know, we have so much power within ourselves. And if we, you know, I know myself, too, you have to be careful of the weight issues and all that sort of stuff. And I know that the carbs are difficult for me as well. And processed foods specifically should be a no-no for me. And sugars, I'm a sugarholic, too. But I try to maintain, you know, if I'm going to deny myself, then I'm going to want it even more. So I will control the amounts that I have. But I'm like you. I cooked from scratch. I did all these things because I came from Europeans, and that's what they did. You know, when you're on a farm, you did everything yourself back then. And so I still do that today. And sometimes I slack off, but you know what? I know I pay for it, and that's not good because it's not good for your body to go through those fluxes and whatnot. So, but how is your book published yet?
No, it's not published yet. I'm still going through tweaking and adding more recipes, and I'm just real excited about it. I hope it helps someone. And like you, I tried cutting back, but everybody's system is different. I can't get away with that, you know, and I had to decide, am I willing to trade my eyesight and my toes and my energy or a longer life for the temporary pleasures of the dessert or the Reese cup or whatever? Yeah. And I had to make a conscious choice. And then God just showed me recently that for me, now I'm talking about me, eating junk food and the fast food and the sugar-laden, nutritionally empty food is equivalent to me putting diesel fuel in my gas car's engine. You know, it's going to run a little bit, but then it's going to starting to get clogged up, and it's going to quit running, and then I'm going to have costly repairs to my car, and the costly repairs for me have been my health.
Exactly. So, and the engine could stop in the long run eventually anyway, right? So not a smart move. So, you know, you've really opened my eyes to health, not necessarily healthy eating, but smarter eating and smarter choices. Yes. And I think that's fantastic. And I, for one, can't wait to read your book when it's published.
Well, the beginning of it, one of the stories out of my book is actually going to be in Angels That Walk the Planet that Don Lord is comprising. So that will be the beginning story there. But, yeah, I mean, you have to know your body. You have to know how the food reacts to your body. And you have to choose to be healthy.
Exactly.
You know, again, before I didn't know I had a choice. I have choices now, and I'm embracing those choices. And with God's help and His wisdom, I'm getting healthy and being better than I ever was.
That is fantastic.
And I'm just grateful for that.
Luna, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, are you willing to let them contact you?
Yes, I have email. I don't have a website set up yet, but I do have an email.
Oh, and what's your email address?
Okay, it's all lowercase. LunaSparrow331@yahoo.com, and I'll answer everyone I can.
That's wonderful, and I know the listeners would love to get in touch with you to maybe even pre-order your book and, you know, learn more about how you made your choices because, you know, to go from having absolutely no choice for a very, very long time in your life to all of a sudden having choices, it must have been like, pardon the scenario, but like a kid in a candy store.
It was freedom. It was like being pinned up in a small dog cage for years, and finally the door is open and you can run free. That is exactly what it feels like.
Well, and you've actually burst through those doors again with your change in your health, your change in your eating style and habits, and you're making a difference for yourself. And you're actually, I believe, teaching your medical practitioners the right way to do things as well. So they're probably learning a lot from you as well.
Yeah, she told me she wished her other patients were like me. She said they just want to peel and to continue doing what they're doing. And I said, well, I'm just totally amazed how much nutrition has to do with our health. Yeah. And she said, you're right, but she said most people won't listen to that. They want to do what they want to do and you suffer the consequences. And I choose not to suffer consequences any longer.
Well, I think you're the smarter one for it, too. So I would really like to thank you, Luna, for being with us today. Is there a special phrase or quote that you would like to share with our listeners?
The one I use a lot is, of course, the one, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, because I can't do this on my own. It's not a willpower thing. This is a lifestyle thing. And I deserve the time and the money or whatever it costs to be healthy. I deserve to be healthy.
Yes.
So that's what I tell myself. I deserve to choose health.
That's fantastic. And you're right. You're absolutely right. We all have that choice to make, and it's what we do with that choice that defines who we are.
Yes, and I've been sharing it with friends. They've noticed what I've been doing, and several of them have some recipes. They've asked me for some recipes, and I told them, I said, it takes commitment. This is not a diet. It's a lifestyle. You have to change your lifestyle to get lasting results.
Absolutely. Well, Luna, thank you so much for being such an informative guest on Powering Through Life. I really appreciate the time you took, and I'm so glad you're still here to be able to tell this story. And it's an amazing one.
Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. I'm just very honored that you did this, and so thank you, Teresa.
Oh, you're very welcome. So thanks again, Luna, and thank you for listening to Powering Through Life.
Well, Divas, that brings to a close another great, inspiring interview on Powering Through Life. Thank you to my incredible guest for sharing your story with us. Divas, if you would like to connect with my guests, just go to divasthatcare.com, click on my picture at the top, that's Teresa Sims, and there you can access all of my interviews. Don't be shy, reach out if you have any questions, or simply just leave us a comment. Also, you can contact me at my website, that's teresasims.com. Thank you for listening to Powering Through Life on the Divas That Care Network.